This is a Torment 12 boss. And this is me killing Belial without even using my main damage skill. I'm easily clearing a pit 115. Not only is this build insanely strong, but it's very tanky as well. And once they do the hotfix for Glenn's Anvil, we're going to be immortal. This is one of the few builds that's going to have insane AoE while also having extremely good bossing. You can also see that the resources are completely managed and we never have to worry about them. And resource management will be a thing of the past once we get the hotfix for our other set. Another insane thing about this build is that you don't even need the Lightning Storm. Check it out. This is a pit 115 still, and as you can see, I'm killing stuff without even using my Lightning Storm. And we're actually doing quite a bit of damage. Even this elite pack here, I can kill pretty handily. That's part of what makes this build so powerful, is because even without the Lightning Storm, we've got a lot of damage, which means that when we double up and we're using both, we're getting insane output. And if you haven't noticed, my health is not going down at all. I can't emphasize enough that this is without Glenn's Anvil, and we're about to get Glenn's Anvil, which is going to be a 200% damage reduction. And right now, I'm on a stronger version of the build, which is great for pushing, but you can actually play this build as a lazy build where you don't have to do anything. You can just walk around and let everything die. And I'll explain both of those for you guys so you can swap on the fly. But first, if you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And also join me on my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamheart. And here's the boss. Boom. I should also mention that I did clear a pit 120 with this already. It wasn't the cleanest run. Once we have the higher survivability with Glenn's Anvil, it's going to be a lot easier. Right now my gear is not that good, so I'm sitting on 26,000 life. You can see in a pit 115, my survivability was just fine. Once you get up to 120, I started to struggle a little bit, but the Glenn's Anvil will solve that, and then I can actually focus in on doing damage rather than trying to survive. So how does this build actually work? So first off, the main damage sources, like I said, is Storm Strike and Lightning Storm. Lightning Storm is a toggle, which means you can leave it on all the time as long as you have resources. But you'll see that when I use it, we burn our resources quite quickly. But that's not really a problem, because as long as we are consistently using our Stone Burst, we're activating our Tybalt's Will, and that is filling up our resources so we never run out. There might be little gaps that you have if you're not consistent with casting your Stone Burst, and in those situations you can just use your Storm Strike, or worst case scenario, you recast your Lightning Storm. Keep in mind you can't recast your Lightning Storm if you're in Grizzly Rage. You can see that it disappears. So you might run into situations where you don't have the ability to recast it, but as I showed in the gameplay, you can just use Storm Strike and Stone Burst and you'll be just fine. Now the reason we're using Stone Burst is because of this set called the Old Mountain, and this allows us to make it to where we do 100% bonus critical strike damage to enemies when they're petrified, and they petrify from earth damage. But on top of that, petrifying enemies makes them absorb our damage, and then we do 200% of that damage when the petrify ends, or if we reach the total amount of their life, which happens when enemies are weaker usually. So we're multiplying our damage multiple times through just this set bonus, so this is very important. And you can see here that I'm actually using the Seal of the Diamond Mind. You don't need this. This part of the set that I'm using is just a bonus. You can swap that out and you can just go with the full set. All you need is the charm that gives you a +1 slot, and then once you have that, you just equip your full set with the 5 pieces, and now we're good to go. And to compensate for the damage that I had from the Den Mother set, which is about 80% I believe, you can easily throw a charm into this slot. For example, our Might of Ursine ring, which is a big part of the build, could just go into the charm slot, and then that frees up your ring to be able to have better affixes, and you can just go with a legendary aspect there. But since we're talking about it anyways, Might of Ursine is scaling our damage by a ton with resolve stacks. This is a huge part of the damage on Druid this season, and is more or less required if you want to be strong. There might be some exceptions, but this is a 6x damage multiplier at least, so it's really hard to not use this. Now most of the rest of the build is just scaling our damage, and I'll go through that in a bit. I should mention that our runes are what are activating the Tybalt's Will, and we'll cover those in a bit as well. And our runes are also activating our Earthen Bulwark, which you can't see on the bar, but we do get just by attacking. And that's important for activating multiple things on the build, such as Overpower. So for our skills, we're using Storm Strike to get our initial damage and build up our Ferocity stacks. These Ferocity stacks are important because the more attack speed we have, the more it locks into the Lightning Storm when we cast it. You can see that that was quite fast, but if I let all of my stacks run off, and actually let's remove our wolves for a moment, because wolves are giving us attack speed as well. Now you can see that when I cast it, it's much slower on the tick rate. But also don't sleep on the damage of Storm Strike. This is a huge single target addition to our build. Right now I'm completely unbuffed and you can already see that it's doing billions of damage. And of course, if you drop the Stone Burst while you're doing that, then you get the Petrify damage as well, which does a huge blast. You can see we had a 1,300 billion there. That's already a trillion damage, and that's without using Grizzly Rage. Just for good measure, let's see what a buffed version of this looks like with Grizzly Rage. So I'm using my Grizzly Rage. I'm going to make sure that I've got all my Grizzly Rage stacks. And now that we've got our stacks, I'm going to drop the Petrify. And I think that was a 6 trillion, but either way, it's a lot of damage. Now, aside from our Storm Strike, we've got our Stone Burst, which is quite important. Not only does dropping this allow you to actually get the Petrify, which means a bunch more damage, but this is also increasing our armor by a ton. It gives us 20% armor and an additional 5% armor for each stack of Resolve. You can see that we have 51 stacks of Resolve, and this is another reason why stacking Resolve is so good. That's actually an insane amount of armor. Then on the flip side, we've got a ton of all resistance coming from our Cyclone armor. Our wolves are just here for a passive 40% attack speed. And that's not only going to help the Lightning Storm like we showed before, but also it helps with the Storm Strike. Our Grizzly Rage is going to be buffing our damage by a ton. It does give us Fortify, but the main purpose is the 200% damage. And on top of that, it's giving us Berserking, which is even more damage, and 20% more armor. So we're getting survivability and damage from everything. And then our Lightning Storm is obviously going to be our main AoE damage source. And this adds a lot of single target damage to the build as well. So now that we've gone over the skills, let's go over some of the other core parts of the build. So Spirit Boons are going to be Prickle Skin if you want more damage. You can also go with Gift of the Stag if you're having spirit issues, although this doesn't really matter if you're doing the build correctly. And then you can go with Wariness for survivability. Under Eagle, we're going with Avian Wrath for the damage, but you do technically have the option of going Iron Feather, and that's just going to be if you need the survivability. You would have to swap out Overload, which means less attack speed. Not to mention Overload is giving us Ferocity, which means that if you swap this off, you have to change your Storm Strike to give you Ferocity instead, which means losing some extra Spirit, which honestly is not too much of a loss because we have plenty of Spirit anyways. Although once we swap to the Storm set, that Storm set is going to be giving us damage based off of how much Spirit we burn, so this one could be more valuable then. We're using Calamity to extend our ultimate duration, and again you have another option for Spirit here if you need it, but I'm telling you, if you do it correctly, you're not going to need it. Then we've got Calm Before the Storm, and this is helping reduce the ultimate cooldown. And honestly, I almost always get my ultimate back around the same time that I need it, but obviously as you optimize the build, you'll get this even more consistently. And like I said, Overload is going to give you increased cast speed. This is an important note. Cast speed is separate from attack speed. Cast speed is the new cap 2 attack speed, which means that even at 100% attack speed, you'll still get this bonus. Now I mentioned the different setups for the set, but also make sure that on these sets you get ranks 2 storm skills. You can see this one is earth skill, so that's not useful. Core skills is technically useful, but you get a lot more out of nature magic or storm skills. Nature magic is ideal because that also works for bulwark. So if you load all of these up with nature magic bonuses, that means you're enhancing your Storm Strike, your Stone Burst, your Cyclone Armor, your Lightning Storm, and your Bulwark. For the gear, you want to go with Air of Perdition, but if you don't have this, you can use Godslayer. For the chest, you're going to use Aspect of Might, but as soon as the hotfix comes in, which is only about 2 days away from the release of this video, then you're going to want to use Glynn's Anvil here. Glynn's Anvil is going to give you extra resolve stacks, which means even more damage, but Glynn's Anvil is insane for damage reduction. For the gloves, we're running the Expectant aspect. For the pants, we're running Tybalt's Will for that resource and a little bit of damage. On the boots, we're running Overcharged. This will increase our damage and apply Vulnerable. On our weapon, we're going with Conceited. On our amulet, we're going with Crushing. On ring 1, we're going with Might of Ursine. And like I said, this can also be a charm if you need it. And our second ring, we're going with Ring of Starlit Skies. But once we swap to the Storm set, this is going to be dropped for purely damage. And I believe I'll be using Thunder God's Blessing, which is a unique ring. And it does work for Druid. We tested that on stream. But also any damaging aspect will work fine here as well. And then for our offhand, we're going with Edge Master. For the stats on gear, you're going to be focusing on the critical strike chance from Air of Perdition. You're also going to be getting a lot of that critical strike chance from both of your weapons. And you can get more critical strike chance from your Ring of Starless Skies and your other offensive slots. All of your offensive slots, including your amulet, both rings, your gloves, and both weapons, are all going to focus on getting as much damage multiplier as possible. Primarily, that's critical strike damage multiplier, but you also want to go for vulnerable damage multiplier and all damage multipliers. You can also get lightning damage multipliers, which is the same deal as all damage, or at least the same bucket. Every single piece of gear should have maximum life on it. You can see that I'm missing some here. And then you're going to try and get as much resistances as possible. Generally, all resistance is going to be your best choice. And that's usually just going to be on your chest, your pants, and maybe your boots. On your boots, you're going with movement speed and a movement speed temper. And it's extremely important that you remember to put maximum resolve stack tempers onto all of your armor pieces and your amulet. You can see here that I've masterworked my bonus into the maximum resolve stacks and gotten a greater affix there. That's a priority on all of your armor pieces, including your helmet, your chest, and your pants. For the amulet, you're going to get the greater affix, and it's okay if you get the bonus into the max resolve stacks here. It should be fairly comparable to putting it into one of your damage multipliers. We're not prioritizing attack speed, but attack speed can be useful. And when it comes to filler stats, willpower, all damage, critical strike chance, attack speed, and lightning damage are all good options that can fill in any of the random spots where you've got nothing else. For the gems, you want to focus on getting good resistances in all of your accessories. I'm going to show you my resistances here. This is what it looks like out of town. If you're in town, this is going to be closer to like 5,000 per, but you can see that they're doubled because of the cyclone armor. But ideally in town, you're looking for about 5,000 fire and lightning resist at least, and usually 3,000 to 4,000 poison resistance will work. Cold resist and shadow resist can be basically nothing. And physical resistance, I like to keep it a little bit higher. I usually don't worry about getting it as high as fire or lightning, but obviously it is here. But I do like having more of this than the average resistance. So you can see here I went with a diamond gem. Normally I don't recommend diamonds, but the reason I went for diamond is because I already had a lot of fire and lightning, so I didn't need the fire gem. My poison resistance is also fairly high, so I didn't go for poison. So rather than going for anything specifically, I went with diamond to try and get my average to go higher. Of course, you're going to want willpower on your pants, and then for your weapons, you're going with topaz so you can get that lightning damage multiplier. For the runes, you're going to want to go with Seer Q, and you're also going to use Igni Ner. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you this now. Once we can swap this set out and use the storm set, so it would be 2 of these storm pieces, the ideal setup will actually not be to run Tybalt's Will. Although technically Tybalt's Will does give 20% increased damage, but there's other options that can do that, like the Berserker one. I forget what it's called. And when you do that, you're going to be able to swap out of your Nair rune. Once we don't need the Nair rune anymore, we can go with a 10% critical strike chance. And alternatively, maybe we could go with something else. I'll have to see what I end up liking, but that'll be a nice boost to the build as well. Basically, this build's going to be way better here very soon, but I wanted to get it out to you guys now because it's already really strong. But the Seer Q is going to be required to pop your Bulwark, and your Bulwark is very important to the build, and you have to have the Unstoppable in order to trigger your Tybalt's Will, otherwise your resources will never work. For the skill tree, we're going with Storm Strike and we're maxing it out. We're going for Spirit, but you can go for Ferocity if you want to swap your Spirit boons around. We're going with additional Chain, so it chains one more time. If you want to focus more into the Lightning Storm instead of the basic attack, you could go for the extra armor here instead, just for the survivability. We're going Werebear, so we can actually use it in Grizzly Rage, and Chain Reaction so that it chains more times. Moving down from here, we're grabbing our Lightning Storm, which we're maxing out. We're grabbing additional strikes, and this is based off Ferocity. We're grabbing minimum strikes so that we start at 2 strikes. And then we're also going with human form because it doesn't matter what form it is. We're casting this outside of Grizzly Rage, so we can just get the extra damage. And then Hero of the Storm, which is the toggle version of Lightning Storm. Next from there, we're going for Stone Burst. And Stone Burst, we're not putting additional points into, but we're going for the Spirit cost. We're also going for the Armor one. We're going for Werebear so we can use it in Grizzly Rage. And Living Stones so that we can place it down and let it grow by itself. Moving down from there, we're going for our defensive options, which is our Earthen Bulwark. This is going to have increased barrier duration so that it's always on, and Travertine Bulwark so we get resolve stacks. We're also going with the Overpower upgrade so we can constantly be overpowered, and then we're maxing out Cyclone Armor. We're not taking either of the top upgrades because we're not actively using it. We're going for Greater Cyclone Armor, which increases our bonuses by 100%, and Resistance so that we can increase our resistances even further. Keep in mind that this 100%, it says all bonuses and damage from Cyclone Armor are increased by 100%. That means that the 30% damage reduction from our set is also going to be increased by 100% with this. Down from there, we're going with Wolves. We're just taking the 1 point. We're going to Stun. This stun point here is actually not that useful. If you do find that you're using it occasionally to try and stun enemies in a pinch, then you can keep the point here. But you could just remove this one if you want to point somewhere else. We're going with Thrill of the Hunt to increase all of our bonuses by 100%. And we're going with Attack Speed so that we get that 40% attack speed. Down from there, we're going to skip this category and go all the way down to our Grizzly Rage. Here, we're basically maxing it out. We're grabbing our cooldown reduction. We're getting the Fortify, and then we're going to Cornered Beast for the extra damage. In our Paragon boards, we're going to be grabbing the Dominate Glyph on our starter board. Then moving up, we're attaching the Survival Instincts board, and here we're going with Keeper. Moving up from there, we're attaching the Constricting Tendrils board, and here we're going with the Spirit Glyph. Moving to the left from there, we're going with the Heightened Malice board, and here we're going with Earth and Sky. Moving down from there, we're attaching our final board, which is Thunderstruck, and here we're going with the Werebear Glyph. Keep in mind that this is a little bit of a mid to late game setup. If you want a setup with less points, in my written guide below, I've got the mid game option. And then if you want one with more points, I've got the end game option. I think that's going to about cover it. I did forget to mention that you should temper some cooldown reduction onto your ring. In fact, both rings, I've got resource generation here for whatever reason. But the cooldown reduction is going to help you keep your Grizzly Rage up. And I think that about covers it. I'll do an updated version of this whenever we have the update for Glynn's Anvil, so I can make sure you guys are all on the same page. But I did mention most of it in this video. But thanks for watching, and make sure you guys come by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamheart, and I'll see you guys there. Daddy Druid out.
Subscribe to Screamheart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his streams chill.